when it comes time to get a divorce, people will threaten. People will say things like, you can't ever divorce me, because if you do, I'll make sure you never get a dime. I'll make sure you're out on the street. You're never going to get anything from me. And so people are paralyzed. They're paranoid that they're never going to get anything. And so they end up staying in abusive situations because of that. So, I know for me, a lot of times as an attorney, I'll say, hey, listen, there are laws around that, especially if you're the non-moneyed spouse. You can, many times, if you go to a lawyer, there are protections in the law, where you can potentially get, either fees, you can get support, you can get temporary support, but a lot of times people don't know that. And so what would you say to people around that?
So I think the first thing that people need to do is to seek out a trusted attorney. That's the first thing. I mean, you should, consult several attorneys, speak to other people who have gone through divorces, see who they recommend. Look online and see what kind of reviews an attorney has. Look at their LinkedIn, see what articles they've published, what's their point of view, all of those types of things. And then you need to understand that the law, particularly, I don't know about every state, but I do know it was certainly in New York, the non-moneyed spouse does have the protections that you're talking about, Rebecca. The non-moneyed spouse is going to likely be entitled to what is called pendente lite relief, right? And pendente lite relief, in essence, is temporary relief, temporary support to make sure that you can pay your reasonable expenses, temporary legal fees so that your attorney can get paid, and so that you are essentially on that equal playing field. But you also need to start to pull some documents, right? So you need to, if you can, make sure that you can get hold of your tax returns, make sure that you have bank statements, credit card statements. Years ago, I had a client, and I often talk about her because she was really quite intelligent. And what she did was she would essentially go through the garbage, believe it or not. And she would pull all these little bits and pieces of paper. And pretty soon she had what was the beginning of the puzzle, right? And we did all of this discovery in her case, but most of the discovery came from her. So she would find this piece of paper that referred to some account that was offshore. And then we would do the digging. And I remember having her husband in a deposition, and he had revealed zero. I mean zero. His net worth statement, which is something that people fill out at the very beginning of a case in order to, for example, get pendente lite support, but also to create this roadmap, his net worth statement was void of any information. And I remember during the deposition saying to him, how did you expect that I was going to find all of the assets that I have found? And he said, I thought you would just keep doing what you're doing. You would keep subpoenaing, and you would keep digging, and you would keep looking, and then you'll find it. And that became the job. But she herself was very resourceful. And it's important that as a spouse, that you look, that you keep your eyes open, that you watch what's happening around you, because you can't live essentially in a shell, right, with everything closed up. You need to keep your eyes open.
Yeah, 100%. And the other thing is that you do need to have some stash of cash, because you're going to need to be able to hire that lawyer. And it does take time to get that hearing, to get to that first hearing.
100%.
Want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that is absolutely true. So look, some people have situations where they're able to turn to family or friends for that first retainer. And that first retainer is essentially, it's that door opening, right? So that you can start to pay an attorney to make the motions or the applications to the court in order to get you that temporary support, those temporary legal fees, to get you set up essentially for the process that is going to occur, right? Where there'll be discovery, where there will be negotiations, and where there may be things like depositions or other court appearances, et cetera. But you're right. you need to have that door be open. And so you either need to put aside cash and open a bank account so that you can over time essentially save up for your retainer, or at least be honest with friends or family and say, look, I'm going to need some help here. I might need to take a loan. I might need to sign a promissory note to you so that I can get myself on my feet again, and maybe help my children as well, because it may be that your spouse is not, giving you sufficient funds to pay not only for your support, but also for your children's support.
Right, exactly.
Could the gaslighting also be not just a way of controlling you or the other person, but also just a way of getting what they want, of justifying what they want? And, I want to be able to do what I want to do. And so I'm going to tell you that we already had this conversation, that you agreed that I could do whatever it is that I want to do. You don't remember having that conversation? Oh, well, I guess you're crazy. um I think it's some of that too.
Oh, I think it's definitely a lot of that.
Yeah. So and do you think that Brene Brown talks in her book Daring Greatly about narcissists and how they're the most wounded of all. They carry the most shame, and so they have the most to cover up for. Do you see that too in your experience?
It's really hard for anyone to diagnose a person with narcissistic personality disorder. And so I tend to lump people in, I don't care what the name is called. If the behaviors are these, then it's not a healthy relationship.
Right.
And on the note of them being wounded, the theories are that narcissists are sort of born out of their own trauma. And if they were raised in an abusive household, then you have a choice of either becoming a narcissist to protect yourself. You're not going to let anyone in. You're going to stop everyone from getting close. And this is following the pattern of how they were abused. The other option when someone has an abusive parent in their life is that they become a codependent, a people pleaser, someone that wants to help everybody and not make any waves. So you've got this push me, pull you kind of a thing. They're takers and we're givers. And so, together we make a perfect match. And that's just the human magnet syndrome, as in Ross Rosenberg's book, is that we are attracted to the drama because we're used to it. And as far as them being able to heal, I don't think that they will ever be able to heal because it is embedded in them. Again, it's a protective mechanism to their own trauma.
Yeah. So how would somebody who wants to divorce a narcissist go about that? What kinds of advice would you give them about, statistics, stories, ways to get out of it?
Well, the first thing is to get support, because you are not about to have a normal divorce. And again, most of the people that come into my groups don't even know they were with a narcissist, don't even know that they've been abused. So when you start a divorce, you're almost innocent at that point. You still have feelings of love and they have none. And then it's so clear in this horrific discard that most of them get to before a divorce that the other person had no feelings. They might have been married for 40 years, but they were just being used. And so when you get into a situation where you're going into a divorce, to prepare yourself by knowing that every trick in the book is going to be used against you. Lies are going to be told. And I think an important thing when you're hearing these in the courtroom, and Susan, you could probably attest to this as well, it's to not react in the judge's eyes. When you're blindsided by lies and accusations in the courtroom, it's to take them offline, take them and understand them, and don't take them as a personal attack, because it's just a ploy. It's a tactic. And while we're sitting there going, how could you not love your children anymore? It's much bigger than that. It's something that without proper preparation for a divorce, you're going to lose in a very big way, because they go for the jugular. There's no question about it. If they punch, they're going to punch harder. And if you're not prepared for that, and you're in this innocent, it was a wonderful marriage, I want to keep it together, they're going to walk all over the victims.
Narcissists have a confession to make, and that is that they are way more afraid of you than you are of them, especially in court cases, mediation cases, or any kind of cases where you have to negotiate with them. But you know what? I have a confession to make too. I'm sick and tired of these people bullying you and making you feel exhausted and paying way too much in attorney's fees and dragging you through the mud. My name is Rebecca Zung, and I'm an attorney. I've been recognized by U.S. News as one of the best lawyers in America. And in fact, I was so sick and tired of these people bullying you that I started studying narcissism so that I could beat them in the courtroom. And now I'm here to make the case so that you can win too. I developed a 4-part proven blueprint that has helped tens of thousands of people take back their freedom, win, and get back their power. And now I'm sharing it with you in a special live event, Outsmart the Narcissist, the 4-part proven plan to take back your power. 4 simple steps, 1 free live event, 1 free hour of your life. That's what stands between you being in hell and you being free. Join me, click the link for Outsmart the Narcissist, the 4-step proven plan to take back your power. Just click the link and let's go.
Tracy, that just rings a lot of bells with some of the things that Rebecca and I have spoken about, because, as I think Rebecca mentioned just before we started this podcast, not too many narcissists end up in long-term marriages. These are not marriages that are successful. So we have certainly seen our share of divorces, and for relationships that have broken down because of this narcissistic cycle, they go from bad to ugly pretty fast in the courtroom. And I was just thinking, can you share some stories of things that you've heard that narcissists have subjected their, I'll call them victims, to in the courtroom setting or in the divorce setting? That might spark some understanding for our listeners.
Well, a narcissist will actually attack your best qualities. That's just a fact. So if you are a wonderful mother, there's nothing better or that's going to hurt you more than to be accused of being a terrible mother. And so they're going to attack the things that you most value. And so in that, I was attacked in my divorce with very false accusations that I had stolen money, and false accusations that I had forged paperwork. None of this was real, and yet they were the ones actually forging paperwork and projecting what they were doing, and yet I had to defend myself. I had to protect myself. And so many people will experience you're a terrible parent, and they'll have child protective services called on them when they are the most loving, caring parents. But if you see these things coming in, they are there to distract the judge. They're there to distract and draw out this divorce to be as long as possible. They're doing it for lots of different reasons. One of them is generally financial, that perhaps they have more money and they can rake you over the coals. And a lot of people end up going bankrupt from a $100,000 divorce. So,
making you suffer as part of
that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
And that's what messes with people's heads the most, is that these false accusations, no matter what it is, it hurts.
Right. You get sucked into the trying to defend yourself or trying to rationalize their crazy behavior, and there's no rationalizing crazy.
No.
And you never get to deal with the actual facts of what's best for the children in reality, because you're dealing with the accusations that you're a bad parent or something like that. So,
Or that you stole money or
or that
whatever it is.
yeah. So you're so busy dealing with all of that craziness
Right.
that you never move forward with the actual divorce.
No, it's such a common thing to project out that someone is something that they're not, to accuse them so that they have to defend themselves, and that's the hardest part in going through a divorce with a narcissist. They are the high conflict divorces. They are the ones that don't end. I had 7 trials. I felt like Casey Anthony. I'm like, did I kill my daughter or something? I don't understand why.
That's terrible.
We're fighting over this much. Why
Right.
are you
But,
doing
but and I admire you for continuing the fight, though, because, even though it's hell to get out of it, and we talked about, the name of our episode today is Escaping Hell. But you always used to tell my clients, and a lot of times it was the women who were more of the victim, but there's definitely men victims as well. But I would say to them, your choices are really, there's only 3 choices here. It's stay with the person, which as soon as I would say that, they would say, no, no. Okay, so door number 2 is take your pat on the head and take exactly what they want you to take in the divorce, whatever the parenting plan is, whatever the support is, whatever um, the
Property.
property division that they think is fair to them, which is basically nothing for you and all for them. Or door number 3 is to fight for what's fair. I mean, those are really the options. And so, I like what you said about, making sure you have the right support, and because it's going to take every ounce of strength you've got.
Yeah.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it can cost that $100,000 that you talked about as well, Tracy. Those are, that fight, even if it's the good fight or the fight based on facts, costs a lot of money in a courtroom.
Yeah, and it's just that sort of mad rabid dog that just keeps coming back. You just think, why can't this just end? Like, I'm not fighting you. Why does it have to keep? Why is something coming out every single time we go to court? And it confuses the victim. It really confuses them because they truly believe that there was a real marriage and that this shouldn't be happening. So when these things happen, it really messes with their head.
Right, because the goal is not to just pragmatically, settle the divorce. The goal is to make you suffer.
Suffer.
And they'll fight for things that they don't even want, like kids. This is
All
a
the time.
huge thing. They
Yeah.
don't even want them, but they don't want you to get them, and they're willing to fight again without any reason or any real interest in, but it's just the battle. It's the battle to watch you squirm in court, and that's their goal. If they can fulfill that, they feel like they've gotten away with something. And when they tip you in court and they tip you in the parental parenting plan, and they get you upset, be really aware that they could be recording you and then using that against you. There's so often where their manipulation of baiting someone is to push you to that point so that you do look crazy. So now they can go around to their next victim and the next victim and tell everyone how crazy you were. So really common.
But during the worst, most traumatic time of your life, you have to make the most critical decisions of your life.
Mhm.
And so you're under siege, and it's bad enough when you're divorcing normally, but then when you add on the layer of divorcing a narcissist, now you're trying to make decisions about your money, your home, your children, all the things that mean the most to you, your business, potentially. While you're under siege and while you're trying to heal yourself. I mean, people who've been in narcissistic relationships for long periods of time are like PTSD. I mean, they're seriously, traumatized, they're trying to make decisions. So, for example, this woman I spoke to this morning, she wants to change her custody arrangement. She said that, when she entered into the custody agreement at the time, she was so terrorized by him. She just wanted to get out of it. She just wanted to be done. And so she agreed to stuff that she didn't want, that she didn't, now she regrets, you know? So what I'd like to hear from Tina is, how did you keep your mindset strong? How were you able to keep going and not give up and keep yourself healthy?
Have you ever met somebody, they started off to be the most charming, charismatic person you've ever met in your life, then they turned out to be your worst nightmare, and then when you go to negotiate with them, they're a living hell? Well, I developed something called the Slay Method of Negotiating with Narcissists, and it has helped tens of thousands of people in more than 150 countries win, go from feeling drained and defeated to getting the outcomes they want. And the reason why it works is because I spent more than 20 years studying narcissism as a trial attorney, and now I'm here to help you win too, and also take your suffering and turn it into your superpower. Take your pain and turn it into profit, peace, and purpose as a highly specialized high conflict negotiation coach. If you want to learn how to do it, then just go to RebeccaZung.com/apply and I will show you how.
It was a process. The first few years, had I not been journaling and blogging about it, if I were to look back, I remember very little of it. I feel like I was operating in a state of trauma and shock and emotions. And for me, it was a few years into it before I started going to sit in the courtroom. And it was a way for me to learn about the process and, how attorneys handle things and how, different case law. And I became a fixture in the courtroom on days that it had nothing to do with me. And just there as an observer, because it allowed, first for me to desensitize myself, because it just became part of my so then walking into the courtroom when it was my own case, I was much stronger. And I was educated on what was going on and the motions that I was filing. And I didn't get it right all the time, but it helped tremendously. And what I learned is that so much of it is about strategy, and judges and attorneys, anybody in those courtrooms, they don't want to see your emotions. That was one of the things I learned quickly is I would walk to the bathroom in the courthouse and have a panic attack or vomit or break down crying. But when I walked through those doors, I had to, put my shoulders back and my head up and, almost role play was kind of the
Yeah.
mentality I had to have. But, and just forming alliances when I would be in the courtroom and I would see another parent who I could, identify as the healthy parent in the situation. I'd follow them out into the hallway and say, here's my card. Sounds crazy. I'd love to go to coffee with you because we have a lot in common. And that started building my local team. So those were some of the things that I did in the beginning. And from day one, I remember people telling me, this is a 50-50 state. California, I think every state is 50-50 at this point. And that's, truly what you just have to accept that. And I refused. I couldn't even grasp how somebody could, some people, it's truly, their exes are so good at impression management that that may be in the cards for them. And then you're forced to accept radical acceptance, managing your expectations, that whole thing. But for me, I couldn't accept that that was what was best for my kids, and that was the mentality I kept moving me forward, and really celebrating the little victories, which I consider to be anytime my kids are a little bit safer. And that just kept the momentum going until I think it was about year 6 that we were assigned a custody evaluator, and he really understood what I was up against. And his orders or his recommendation to the court were unlike anything I've ever heard of before. And it was so strict. And the judge ended up saying, I'm not going to adopt all of these because I don't want to micromanage this guy. But the ultimate ruling on year 6 was permanent supervised visits. So he could never again be alone. And the judge said, I intend for these to be final custody orders, which was huge. But as we know, a narcissist can't handle that. Their ego doesn't want someone supervising them. That's a huge threat. And so he jumped ship, and we didn't hear from him for a year and a half. Um, but that was a year and a half of peace. And I
Yeah.
was fantastic. So it's those baby steps. It's, you know what, today my kids are a little bit safer, and that kept me going. And when I did, there were so many times where I threw myself a huge pity party when I got slammed in court, and I just always set an end time. I can allow myself a day or two to be mad or angry because it's warranted. But then, Friday, I'm going to dust myself off, and I'm going to try again because my kids need me. There's no one else that's going to fight for them.
Absolutely. I just want to inject a little bit of the legal side of some of the things that you just said. And one is that, yeah, there is a kind of unspoken presumption, I'll call it, for this 50-50 thing right now in most of the states. I think there are a couple of holdouts. I think New York doesn't quite have that presumption yet, but it's not necessarily a legal presumption, meaning a legal presumption would mean that when the court sits down, when the judge sits down, then they're going to presume that this is what it's going to be. And then the other person who doesn't want that has the burden of proving why it shouldn't be that. So that would be a legal presumption. So it's not necessarily a legal presumption in a lot of the states, but it's kind of like an unspoken presumption. And so what I want people to remember is that what the real presumption is and should always be is best interest of the child. And I just had a situation with this with the judge back in January. I was at a hearing, and the judge, the baby at the time was maybe 5 months old or something like that. And the judge was like, well, you guys are coming to trial in May. So, don't bother coming in here if, that it's going to be 50-50 and whatever. And I'm like, really, Your Honor, before you even hear one word about what's in the best interest of this child, that there's 18 factors in the statute that you're supposed to consider. So if you're making a decision right here and now, then that's grounds for your recusal. And so, right away, he's like, oh, of course, we have to, consider the factors. And, and of course, he backpedaled right away. But, I want people to understand that, yes, it's that, but don't just give up on that. Don't just say that's what it is and be resigned to that. Remind the court, remind the judge, remind everybody you can that the standard is best interest of the child. And there is, I'm sure, a statute in every single state that has, the factors that have to be considered by the court. So don't just like resign yourself to that's what it's going to be. So
Rebecca, I have a comment on that though, because despite that, the best interest of the child, anyone who's, doing advocacy work, mental health work, you've been in the divorce space, in almost all of these cases, I'm willing to hazard a guess of 75 to 90% of these cases, they're not taking into account the best interest of the child. And these statutes and these 18 points and all this stuff can exist. And in that particular case, it might have even been easier because it was a 5-month-old baby. But when I am seeing over and over and over again is cases where there is no way on planet Earth that the best interest of this child is being accounted for. So even if that's written into the law, and I suppose, yes, it becomes one more grounds of which an attorney could attempt to push the point, I still feel like most judges are going to reject that out of hand because they still feel like the argument of a parent that's antagonistic and toxic and undermining and invalidating and alienating and all the things that they are, is that they're going to say there's no evidence of that. The evidence that you'd have to show that it's not in the best interest of the child is often quite physical. Like you lived 20,000 miles from the kid's school, or you travel 3 weeks a month. They'll run with that. But these subtle psychological factors, which I don't even think are subtle, I am not seeing a judge in America account for this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's the difficulty, right? Because it's like, it is so subtle, and the judges are always looking for the easy way out.
Yes.
I mean, and so it is difficult. So what you have to do is you have to be able to present a case in such a way that they can't look away. And you can't go in and say the person's a narcissist, or,
Right.
accuse them of any kind of something like that. That's not, readily supportable, because that's when you're going to lose your own credibility, even if the person is the most flaming narcissist
Right.
on the planet. So you have
Mhm.
to go in with reams of supporting documentation as to what's in the best interest of the child. I mean, Tina's nodding her head, because
Yeah.
you figured it out, and I'm really amazed and give you such props that
Mhm.
you were able to go in there and think of the idea of, I'm going to go watch other court proceedings and figure it out. So
Yeah.
talk more about like how
Yeah.
you were able to do that, because there's so many people out there who can't afford a good lawyer, who can't
Right.
afford a therapist, they can't afford anything. They're like, you were talking about going to the food pantry or whatever. I mean, if it's like eating versus an attorney, you're going to pick
Right.
eating.
Mhm.
Right.
So talk more about that.
So, I know one of the things I talk to parents all the time who will tell me, I don't have time to go sit in the courtroom. I tell them, you don't have time not to.
Mhm.
I was working full time. One of the things I didn't mention, when I left my marriage, um, just so people don't, go, well, she has all these resources or whatnot. I left with $178 to my name, not a penny in retirement, not a penny in any type of account, literally under $200. And I was working full time. I had two little girls in preschool. The cost of preschool is insane when you've got two little ones. But I made that a priority. And, however you have to do it, for me, that was the number one. That was the best thing I could have ever done. It gave me so much insight into things attorneys used. And then I would go, you know what? Well, and a lot of people, so, how did you win based on him being a narcissist? I've never used that word. I've written 4 books on the topic, but I've never used that word narcissist to anybody. I focused on his patterns of behavior that were
Exactly.
affecting my kids.
Exactly.
And, and pain, seeing, and one thing I don't think people understand, if I were in courtroom A, I would present my exact case one way. But if I were in courtroom B, just based on what I know about that judge, I would present my case completely different, because they're human. They bring in their own biases
Yep,
and
they do.
personal. There's a judge down in Southern California who lost a child to a drug overdose. So she takes addiction issues
Mhm.
very seriously. My ex-husband was an alcoholic, so you better believe I would hit heavy on the alcoholism in her courtroom. And I think people don't give that, there's no rule book for any of this. And
It's so smart, so
So
smart.
smart. So smart.
thank you. So much of it was learning, so many learning lessons. And when I was in the hallways of the courtroom on break, I would make conversations with every attorney that would talk to me, and, and you share my story. I couldn't afford their consults, but if they're bored sitting in the hallway, I would use that as an opportunity to introduce myself, let them know. And so many were so helpful to me through this process, just really forming those connections, knowing who every single player is in your system. Every evaluator, you need a notebook of just family court professionals. Anytime you hear something about one of them, or you witness an evaluator testifying in court, or a minors counsel, write down every detail about them so you can make an informed decision. If you are going to be assigned an evaluator, I think one of the things I was so naive about in the beginning, I was desperate for someone to listen to me. And so I would show up in court and I would beg, appoint minors counsel, appoint an evaluator. Somebody's got to see what's happening. And if I could go back and do it all over again, I would have said, here are my 3 selections for an evaluator. I don't care which anybody can choose from this list,
That's what
but
I
I
do.
would. Yeah, exactly. And then it gives the other side the power and control that they need to make that decision. But like in my case, the minors counsel who was appointed, because I didn't know anything about him, he turned out to be a bigger narcissist than
Oh,
my ex-husband in a lot of ways. And so it was a complete waste of time and energy and resources. And so really entrenching yourself in your system and learning the ropes and the people you have to do it.
That's such great advice.
Mhm.
Really, really great advice. As you were talking, I was wondering if one of the other things that you did, because if you did, this would be a great idea. If you know that there are particularly good lawyers or lawyers who understand, what you're dealing with, pleadings are actually public information. So did you go to the clerk and read motions and look at stuff that other lawyers had filed?
So if I saw a case that closely resembled my case, I would take down their names and go find them, because in our court we're pretty archaic. We have like you have to get these little slides and you look
Oh,
at
okay.
all of the microfiche. And so I would go pull people's cases and just sit there and go through their whole case from
That's what
start
I
to
was wondering.
finish.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's exactly
Yeah.
what I was wondering that you did. Yeah. So that's so smart. Really, really smart. But of course, very time consuming,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So, um, so Dr. Romani, what would be, ways that people can kind of self-care and cope
Mhm.
during this process?
Tina, what is so striking about what you just said, and just so everyone knows, Tina is actually literally one of my favorite people on the planet, and she knows that too.
Aw.
So I really, I mean, I know the depth of her story is that, what's striking to anyone hearing this is that, and what I see in many of the clients I work with is that they get exhausted. They go to a place of full on helplessness, hopelessness, and powerlessness, which are often some of the last stops on the train before full blown major depression and anxiety disorders and all of that, like really major psychological and psychiatric, fallout from this. And as a result, the persistence you showed, Tina, is remarkable because
Hmm.
and what I love about what you did, Tina, was you weren't trying to control things you can control, namely judges who didn't get it, custody evaluators who didn't get it, court systems who didn't get it. You weren't trying to control those mechanisms. You were trying to learn about them. And of all the guidance I've ever heard, because you feel so powerless, give yourself the time to learn. Look up the cases, learn what happened in those cases, learn about the judges. I mean, I think that anytime we can give a person a sense of control, that's something they can actually do, is really, really important. But I do have to say, Tina, there's a unique resilience that you're manifesting, because I do think for people, the day in and day out, the demoralization, and no matter how much evidence they present to the court, it feels like no matter what, it's not working out their way, to the point where I've seen children who are, being forced to co-reside, and have custody with the more narcissistic parent, to the incredible detriment of the child's mental health. And the mother can't even make the argument in this case that really it is exposure to this toxic parent. I mean, he has completely worked that whole system beautifully. So to your question though, Rebecca, number one, I would say it's absolutely critical you reach out not only for therapy with somebody who gets narcissistic abuse. And I'm really put that point on it, because many, many times I actually don't think that clients in this space should be entirely targeted as though they have post-traumatic stress disorder. I think PTSD is a very different kind of phenomenology. And while addressing early traumas and all of that may be an issue, I think that there's something rather unique about the narcissistic abuse space, because it moves pretty quickly when a person gets lots of education. Because I am shocked in 4 to 6 sessions when a client really is helped to understand what happened, how their own early, their family of origin issues connect, and they see it. They're like, that's it. Like, I'm good. Thank you. I'm not a crazy person. Thank you. That's not how treatment for post-traumatic stress
That
disorder
is
works.
so
Yeah,
good.
it's very, very different. And now, are there many, many people out there who experience issues in their experience of a narcissistic divorce, physical violence, sexual violence, severe financial deprivation, coercive control, all things that are associated with PTSD? Absolutely. And I do think that is a subset of cases, but I think an even larger subset of cases are people who really are experiencing a more pure version of being absolutely confused by the manipulation. And once they simply get psychoeducation, which is how I got into putting out these YouTube videos, because not everyone could come sit in my office. There's just not even enough hours in the day for me to do that. I wrote books for this reason, thinking if people could get this, they may stop blaming themselves. So it becomes therapy with someone who gets it. Number two is also accessing the advocacy community. That is something Tina opened me up to, is that there are people like Tina out there who get it and put resources out in a way from a lived experience perspective. Her Facebook page is a robust resource that I refer all of my clients going through this too, and to her website. So those services exist, basically a support group mechanism of people who get it. But then beyond that, I really, really do tell people is that you are not defined by this experience. I actually think that survivors of narcissistic abuse who really then take this as a jumping off point, to the degree we're talking about it being a trauma, what I really do see is tremendous post-traumatic growth. People saying, I can see these people coming from a mile away. I am actually going to be a lot more careful in my relationships. I am getting rid of the people in my life who are not good for me. They actually do a whole like clean out, like a toxic dump.
So
They
good.
knock everyone out because they're like, I'm not doing this anymore. And they realize how many people in their midst were the enablers of the narcissistic abuse. And through a good support network, therapy, advocacy, support groups, you get people who say, it's okay. It's okay to remove people from your life, because they'll get a lot of guilt. Like, how dare you not speak to this one? How dare you do you? And so it's very much it's a process of healing, which I've got to tell you, I have seen many, many people soar. They go back to school, they take on the careers they thought they wouldn't, they travel, they feel like better parents. I mean, they really do come out of it. But all of that said, it really is a daily practice. Things like mindfulness, meditation, getting also treatment for other disorders that may have come up or gotten exacerbated, anxiety disorders, depression, substance use disorders that can sometimes flare up in the face of all of this. It's about taking care of you. And also keep in mind, Rebecca and Tina, you know this very well, is that people who've been through a narcissistic divorce or a long period of narcissistic abuse in their lives, self-care for themselves is the first thing they threw out. They stop taking care of themselves. They'll often start eating more poorly, gaining weight, making themselves at risk for things like diabetes. They don't get their regular healthcare appointments. They don't take care of themselves because in some ways, staying in a narcissistically abusive relationship is so sort of self-harming that you're on like, why would I take care of myself? It's like you're a car, you just drive into the ground at that point. And that awakening of getting out of that relationship is often an awakening that you're this beautiful soul, this beautiful creature that deserves to be taken care of. So it's lots of enlightenment, lots of awakening, lots of education, lots of support, lots of therapy. And again, slowly but surely going into a wiser future.
Yeah, that's such great stuff. Really, really good advice. And I just want to add in, as far as like the legal perspective on this. Something that people can do is, maybe if you can't afford to have a lawyer for the entire process, but maybe have a consulting lawyer, maybe somebody that you'd be willing to, if you have a little bit of money, you could go in and just make sure that, kind of like what Tina did when she was sort of having these hallway conversations. But, if you wanted to have somebody who was, taking a look at an agreement and maybe just reviewing an agreement for you and just spending an hour of their time doing that, something, where you get a little bit of that legal protection if you can afford to have even that. Obviously I have a program for that as well for people. And, but if there's a way that you can access some help, that's, I think, really, really helpful. For people to have access to that. Making that transition between summer and fall is always a crazy thing. And that's why I love having a leather jacket, like my gorgeous one from Quince. And they have timeless and high quality items, which I love. And they don't blow my budget, which I also love. They have cashmere sweaters and washable silk tops. And everything is like 50 to 80% less than other brands, which I also love. They cut out the middleman. They pass the savings on to us, which is also amazing. It's safe and ethical, which I also love. I really love my brown leather jacket from them. It's super stylish and it's high quality. Just love that. So make switching seasons a breeze with Quince's high quality closet essentials. Go to quince.com/negotiate for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/negotiate to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/negotiate. So, maybe you want to talk a little bit more about the types of tricks that your former husband played in the divorce, and then we can talk about you know, what's going on with them psychologically from the psychological perspective when all that's happening.
Right. I know that very quickly, he weaponized my children. He knew that that was the one way to hurt me. He knew that that was my biggest button. I always tell people, figure out what their biggest buttons are, their biggest triggers. I know you call it leverage and, that type of thing. And that, it's so true. I knew very early on that money was his button. um, One of the things I was up against is that I've always maintained my custody battle wasn't just with him, it was with his mom.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
with his dad, who both had standings in our community. They had founded a local Catholic high school. They had, their roots in pretty deep here. And so he went on a smear campaign telling, we were active in the business community, telling everybody that I had, had affairs. I've never cheated on anyone in my life. I just, and so it was painful at the time, but he knew that my kids were the way to hurt me. And so not telling me where they were going to be on visits. He would give me addresses, and they were always in gated communities, so I couldn't access the house. But I remember having a realtor friend take me in because I knew he was lying about where he was keeping my kids, and I was completely distraught. Um, we would go to the address and it would be an empty dirt lot in a gated community.
Oh,
And
God.
and the court just kept giving him so much grace. They would giving almost like he had just made a mistake giving me the address, and then it would be 2 or 3 different fake addresses, to where the court finally started cracking down on him. But we the court in the beginning, for the first, I'd say 2 years, lumped us both into the high conflict category.
It's
And I
very
didn't.
common.
Absolutely. And so, we would go into the courtroom and the judge would look at me and go, Swithin, what are you on the docket for today? And I'd be like, well, like, I'm here to protect my kids. And we were in court a lot. 2012, filed, I took him to court 13 different times. And my mentality was, if you're not going to protect my kids this month, I'm going to just keep coming back over and over again, because I need to lay my head down on a pillow knowing that I've done everything in my power this week to protect them. And he was putting them in dangerous situations and, never knowing where they were. He has family members who are very dysfunctional. It was a big part of my battle trying to protect my kids from people in his family. And so he had a high off of using them to just torment me. And it was painful. I'm so thankful that we aligned with therapists early on, for my kids even, who understood what I was up against. I know how blessed I am with that, because and I do feel that so much of it is in how you present yourself. And I was very careful to remove myself from the conflict and tell them, I don't care if you believe his story or my story. That's not what I'm here for. I need my little girls to have tools to navigate what I'm having a hard time navigating as a 40-year-old woman. And so I'm incredibly thankful that we had people, but that wasn't always the case. We went through 2 full custody evaluations here in California. Minors counsel was appointed. I had CPS involved in my case 3 times, and 90% of those people completely failed my kids. Um, and my battle. So my, oh,
Tell more about that. Like, in what way? How did they fail them?
CPS, in my opinion, the most broken agency in this whole family court arena. My kids were almost drowned in a swimming pool. I feel like my ex-husband is more in the sociopathic category. To this day, I feel like it was not accidental
Oh,
that
God.
they almost drowned. And he admitted that they almost drowned. CPS was called. They gave him a pamphlet on pool safety, and closed it unfounded, even though he admitted that they almost drowned. He left my daughter in a car for 45 minutes while he watched a triathlon on TV in a gym. when she had just been released from the hospital after having a 45-minute seizure with orders to never leave her alone. She was 4. And he admitted that he left her in a car with the windows cracked for 45 minutes. And they gave him a slap on the wrist and said, our hand, and said, let's talk about car safety. You can't leave kids in a car. And they closed it unfounded. So
Was this before or after the pool incident? I mean, come
that
on.
was before. That was before the pool incident. And then he physically assaulted my older daughter when she was 7, grabbed her by the arm. I went to the police station with her, marked it as unfounded. They did label him a moderate risk, but they did nothing. And so, it just, in our first custody evaluation, I was so new into this and still had not connected all of the dots that the reason my case was so high conflict was because he was a narcissist. I just thought, what the hell? What? I just feel like I don't even understand. I'm in some warped reality. And, the first custody evaluator, I was not, at that point, I hadn't established patterns of behavior to truly explain to her what was going on and to articulate the issues. And she was just, a lot of them, the second they get a case, their goal is to close it and be done with it. And they don't really do the work. And I think that, the threshold of what's acceptable when it comes to parenting for me is a heck of a lot different than the rest of the family court system.
Well, I think the problem with anything like CPS or agencies like that is that they're so used to seeing, the kids who are living in complete squalor. They're just used to going in, let's check to make sure there's food in the refrigerator, and something like that. And so when they see upper middle class or middle class family who the parents are going through a bad divorce, it's like, here we go again. They're just trying to use us as leverage to try to gain some kind of advantage in the divorce, and let's just get this thing off of our thing. And it's the same thing with judges, quite frankly. I mean, judges are evaluated based on how quickly they move their cases off their docket. They're also evaluated on how often they're appealed, and they have way too many cases on their docket. They're already super backlogged, and hundreds of cases are being filed every single month in every single jurisdiction, maybe even thousands depending on where people live. And there's only a handful of judges on the family law bench. Most of the judges who sit on the family law bench don't even want to be on the family law bench. They're rotated through different sections of the court system, and family law is the one that nobody wants. And so there's a few family law judges that are devoted to family law, and they stay in the family law arena for a long time, and then those are the ones that end up writing textbooks and things like that. But for the most part, and there are a few that were family law attorneys, but for the most part, you're getting judges who don't understand family law. They don't want to be there. They have too many cases, and they just want to move them along. And they just see two people who are fighting. They're just like, oh, here we go again. Two people who are fighting.
And I think a lot of them are so highly narcissistic themselves that they can't even recognize the issues in front of them because it so closely relates to who they are.
Oh, that's so true too.
So let's talk about the 11 sneaky things that narcissists do in divorce. So first of all, before we get to that, you need to understand something about narcissists. And that is that with a narcissist, you're either for them or against them. And if they find out that you're against them, once you're into that discard phase, then you become public enemy number 1. And now they need to take you down. And the other thing that you need to understand is that they get narcissistic supply from jerking you around. So while you might think, what is it that they want? I'll just give it to them. What they want is to jerk you around. They get supply from that. And so when you just say, I'll just give it to them, what you're basically saying is, I want this over. And if you're trying to make it be over, then you're trying to say, I'm going to take away a source of supply from them, which they don't want to happen. Get it? So
That's why that option of just giving them whatever it is that they want and walking away is really an illusion. It's a trick because they will constantly move goalposts and do all sorts of things because they get supply from jerking you around and intimidating you and, making the process a nightmare for you. So that's why you have to kind of approach it from a different angle. And that's what I teach you in my SLAY methodology, which stands for strategy and leverage and anticipating and focusing on you. So remember, they're difficult people anyway. They thrive on conflict anyway, even in regular life. And so when you're dealing with it in a divorce situation, you are now dealing with whoever they were on a regular basis, but on steroids. They're like 50,000 times worse. So they want to take you down before you can take them down. They want to expose you and make you look bad before you can make them look bad. It becomes this massive, huge game to them. All right. So, what kinds of things do they do? Well, I mean, it ain't good. Let's just say that. But let's go through a few of their favorites. Number one is they will lie. They're going to lie about anything. They're going to lie about everything. They're going to lie about stuff they don't even need to lie about. They're going to lie about stuff that's readily verifiable. You will be saying to yourself, how are they getting away with this? And the thing that I want you to remember is that the only person that can hold them accountable is the judge, no one else. There's no, magical fairies that come out or stormtroopers that come out in your living room that go, "Hey, you're not supposed to do that." So, when you say, how are they getting away with this? You have to remember, okay, well, who can hold this person accountable? Only the judge. And how do you get the judge to hold this person accountable? Well, you do that through filing a motion and setting it for hearing or something like that. So the only other way other than that you can get them to do something that you want them to do is through actually creating leverage and letting them feel threatened, letting them feel like they're going to be exposed in some way in the negotiation process. But anyway, I'm digressing. Anyway, here we are. So they will lie. They're going to lie. They're going to lie in motions. They're going to lie in pleadings. They're going to lie in depositions. They're going to lie to the court. They're going to lie to the lawyers. They're going to lie to mediators. They're going to lie about everything. Don't be surprised when they lie. Just like, oh, yeah, there they are lying, and then use it to your advantage. You can use it to your advantage. When they go and lie like that, you're going to go, yay, thank you. Thank you very much, because that will become part of your leverage. Got it? All right. And by the way, if you know that they are big, fat, hairy liars, give me a total liars in the comments right now. All right. Ready for number two? Number two is they will obstruct. They will withhold information. They will not give you the financial documents that they're supposed to, or they'll give you some of them, or they'll give you all the months except July. It's so annoying, but that's what they will do. I know it's crazy, but they just do that just to annoy you or to withhold information or to try to hide information, or they want to make you work for it and they want it to cost you more money. So that's number two. Number three is they will manipulate text messages, emails. I've seen people, where the narcissist will send a confirmation email for an agreement that, obviously didn't take place. So annoying, right? They will twist everything you do or say. All right. And I want you to remember that everything you put your hand to is a potential trial exhibit. So if you don't want to see it again, do not hit send, do not push post or whatever it is. And if you want more on how to respond powerfully to text messages, definitely check out my video on kick-ass responses to narcissist texts for sure. All right. Ready? Number four sneaky things narcissists do in divorce is they use threats and intimidation tactics. They're going to say things they want to trigger you. They know how to trigger you. So they're going to say things like, you're never going to see your kids again. I'm going to put you in jail. I'm going to accuse you of this. I'm going to make sure that you have no money and you're living on the streets. They know what your worst fears are, so they push on those. They want to trigger you. All right? Just don't fall into that. I mean, most of the time when, I was talking to clients on a regular basis, I would be spending a lot of my time dispelling myth. 95% of the time, their threats are just a bunch of crap. Just remember that. All right, number 5, line up flying monkeys. Oh, yes, especially the coverts. You know how they love them, some flying monkeys. Yes, they do. And they love to fly, get those flying monkeys to believe all of their lies and how great they are and how horrible you are and smear you. It's part of the whole smear campaign thing. And I do have a whole video on how to shut down a narcissist smear campaign. If you want to check that out, you can. Number six is they will use the court system as a sword, file all kinds of stuff, which leads me to number 7, which is they will file unnecessary motions. This is part of using the court system as the sword. They will just file all kinds of stuff to drive you absolutely insane and make sure you're spending lots of money and you're always on the defense and you feel like you're a turtle on your back with their foot on you, right? Number 8, they will use children as pawns. This is the one that's like super sad, and I'm sorry to hear all the time, and I'm sorry to see when it happens, because that's, the children are innocent victims in this, and they are not thinking about what's in the best interest of the children when they do that. So that's number 8. Number 9 is that they will hide money and assets. A lot of times they've been doing that for a long time, even before the divorce started, or they will move things, or they'll put things in other people's names, or they will take cash and put it in different places, or they'll put cash with someone that they trust. Cash is hard to track down, but most of the time other monies are not as hard to track down. And a lot of times, by the way, there's not as much hidden money as you might think. You become so paranoid because they've done so much to you that you think that it's a lot worse than it is. So hopefully that makes you feel better. Next one is number 10. Number 10 is that they will ignore court orders. And again, this is where you're going to be saying, how are they getting away with this? And again, it's like, if they do that, let's say they're ordered to produce a document by a certain date according to the court. Or let me give you a different one. Let me say that they're supposed to pay child support on the first of the month, and now it's the second, third, fourth, or fifth of the month, and it hasn't been paid. And you're sitting in your house going, how are they getting away with this? I want you to think that through, because the reason they got away with it so far at that point was because no one would know about it that needs to know about it, because the only person that needs to know about that is the judge. So when they ignore court orders, you need to file something to let the judge know that they ignored the court order. Whether it's a motion for contempt or a motion to compel or a show cause to, should they be held in contempt, something, whatever needs to be filed in your particular court. And sometimes there's different languaging in different courts, but if they do that, you just need to let the courts know. Don't let them get away with it. Even if you file whatever you need to file and the hearing doesn't get set for 3 months or whatever, don't let them get away with it. You have to stay on them. You are conditioning them on how to treat you. So that's number 10. You ready for number 11? This is the last one. And this is by no means a comprehensive list, by the way. I'm quite sure that all of you guys are going to say that there's lots more. And you can definitely go ahead and comment below other ones that you've seen too. All right, ready for number 11? Number 11 is stalking, threats of violence, actual violence. Just remember that everything that you do or say can be used against you and probably will be if you are dealing with a narcissist. Unfortunately, as I said, they're big, fat, hairy liars. You're getting ready to divorce a narcissist. Maybe you're in the process of divorcing a narcissist, and you're scared to death that the narcissist is going to use the court system as a sword. Or what does that even mean, that they use the court system as a sword? When they go to divorce, they are now in what we call the discard phase. And if you want to know about the 3 different phases of a narcissistic relationship, which is love bomb, devalue, and discard, check out my videos on love bombing, devaluing, and discarding. But once you get into the discard phase, it's really the birth of the smear campaign. They can start this process months and months and months before the divorce it has even been filed. You know, they just start dropping these little breadcrumbs around to their flying monkeys or to the other people that they want to line up to be on their side, because they're just starting to plant these little seeds that there's something wrong with you. So for example, they'll say, you know, Mary had a little too much to drink at the party, and they say that like 6 months before the divorce was even filed, because they're kind of starting to see the writing on the wall. And so they just start to say these little things like, oh, I'm kind of worried about her. You know, they put it in this terms of, oh, I'm so worried about that person. And then boom, once the divorce starts, they are now suddenly asking for sole custody or supervised time sharing, or they want a custody evaluation, something like that. And it's like the craziest thing. You know, so I have a situation like that right now with one of my clients. My client is the husband, and the two of them are in the same exact profession, and they even own the business together. They have 3 children together. They have shared custody. I mean, you know, even when they were still married, they shared responsibilities. Both of them were taking the children to various sports events. Both of them were making dinner for the children. Both of them were helping with homework. Both of them were equally involved in the children's lives. So I crazily thought, oh, we'll start this case and it'll be no problem. Since they're in the same profession, we're just going to be drafting a marital settlement agreement. I'm sure it'll just be 50-50 custody. There won't be any alimony issues. But no, she goes and hires a lawyer that likes to help people use the court system as a sword and weaponize the court system. And suddenly the woman, the wife, filed a motion for a custody evaluation, and now all of a sudden she's withholding time sharing from my client. All of a sudden, when the case starts, he's a terrible parent. He beats the children. He does all of these things. Meanwhile, right up until the day that she filed the petition, they were sharing all the responsibilities for the child. But now here she is using the court system as her sword, weaponizing the court system to gain leverage over my client, to show that she's the one in control, to show that she's the one with the power, to show that she's the one that can make him squirm. Because remember, narcissists need an endless amount of supply. Supply is their food source, their oxygen, it's what they live on. So they get supply from jerking people around. It sounds like the craziest thing. When you're going to try to resolve a case, a divorce case, or any kind of issue, any kind of dispute with a narcissist, and you are a reasonable person, you are not on the same page, because that narcissist is not looking for an ending of the situation. The narcissist is looking for a way to continue to jerk you around. So while you're going, well, this doesn't make any sense. Like, why are we throwing all this money at this situation? Well, the reason why is because they are enjoying the process. They'll tell you that they aren't. They'll tell you it's your fault that it's taking so long. They'll tell you that you are the reason that they had to do all these things, because they had to save their children by asking for sole custody, or save their children for asking for supervised time sharing. But
That's not what they really want to do. What they really want to do is jerk you around. I've actually had clients where they were the ones who were the narcissists tell me, I'd rather pay you than her. I'd rather keep the lawyer working and doing things to make the other person miserable than to actually resolve the case. Sounds crazy, but it's not crazy when you know what the motivation is behind it. And if you don't want this to happen to you, I want to see an I'm fighting back in the comments. If you are dealing with this and you're seeing this narcissist using the court system as a sword, or you think that they're going to be using the court system as a sword, there's only one way to get back at this, and that is to shift the dynamic, turn the tables, because you're going to feel like you're being pelleted with ammunition all over the place. They're going to use every single thing they can in their arsenal to make your life as miserable as possible. So you're just going to be sitting there defending. It's like you're trying to get yourself out of a paper bag. So the only thing you can do is use my SLAY method, which of course I have a whole course on, slay your negotiation with a narcissist, but understand that SLAY stands for strategy, leverage, anticipating what the narcissist is going to do and focusing on you and your case. And that's the only way you're going to do it. And you need to go on the offensive. And maybe even use the court system as your own sword, but in a way that ethically manipulates the manipulator, in a way that makes them think that you are potentially going to be interrupting their source of supply, so that they feel threatened, because the only way that you're going to get them to stop using the court system as their weapon, as their sword to make you crazy and use it as a form of getting supply for themselves, is by fighting back, is by going on the offensive, is by threatening their source of supply, by saying, okay, potentially you're going to look bad if you do this, that, or the other thing. Creating leverage against them. You know, inside my course, I give like 30 different examples of leverage, because that's like so important. I also have a whole video on it. So if you haven't checked that out, make sure you check out my video on how to create leverage and what is leverage when you're dealing with a narcissist. And we'll drop a link to that below as well. The main thing that you need to remember is they will use the court system as their sword, as a weapon, as a means to make you crazy. Just expect it. Don't be surprised when they do that. But you need to have a plan of attack, a plan to fight back, a plan that has you controlling the process instead of them. What if you could just take a shot and lose all the weight you wanted to? I know for me, a few years ago, I was dealing with thyroid issues, menopause issues, autoimmune issues, all the things, and I gained a bunch of weight and I lost it all, but it took forever. And I wish that something like Robody had been around back then to help me lose the weight. But now you get the benefit of it, because Robody is now around to help you lose weight. It's just one shot a week. And combined with a healthy lifestyle, you can lose 15 to 20% of your weight in a year on average and actually keep it off. They've helped more than 200,000 people so far, and they help you even with support, with getting the medication through your insurance and everything that you need, so that you can actually lose the weight. That means that it's such a great opportunity for you now. So average weight loss is 15 to 20% in a year with a healthy lifestyle change, and BMI and other eligibility criteria apply. Go to ro.co/Rebecca. Sign up today and you'll pay just $99 a month for your first month and $145 a month after that. And medication costs are separate. That's ro.co/Rebecca. So I am breaking down Mariah Carey and Nick Cannon's divorce in this video. So I actually read Mariah Carey's autobiography. I'm a fan. I think that she has a beautiful voice, and in a lot of ways, I think that she's a misunderstood person. I identify with her in a lot of ways. She is biracial. I'm also biracial. I'm half Chinese. She's half African American, and I know what it's like to grow up where, you know, you don't fit into one world, you don't fit into another world. And, you know, I know how it's, how that is. And, you know, she and I are about the same age. And hey, I wish I had her voice, but, you know, she grew up around the same time I did. So, you know, in a lot of ways, I identify with some of the things that she's had to deal with. So she got married very young the first time, which I did as well. She got married to Tommy Mottola, and clearly it sounds to me like it was a very narcissistic type of control relationship, at least from the way that she describes it. I mean, she had a very tumultuous upbringing from what she describes. Divorce, she was back and forth between her family. She had siblings who were much older than she was. You know, there was a lot going on in her childhood. In a lot of ways, she had to grow up very quickly. And not to say that she was totally a victim in everything, but I mean, there was a lot going on. There was definitely a lot of volatility in her childhood. So she got married very young the first time, which I did too. I got married in 19 the first time. I think she was like 20. She marries this, you know, CEO of Sony Music who was, you know, very powerful and um, pretty much took over her life and everything about her, her career, uh, every way she dressed, literally controlled almost even every breath she took. And so she had to escape that. And it was not an easy thing because she had to escape her career, everything. So she gets married again to Nick Cannon, who is much younger. It's a much different dynamic, a much different relationship. They definitely had fun together. She enjoys his company. They make each other laugh. She wants to have children. They both want to have children. They have children together. They have these twins. She has these twins kind of at the 11th hour as far as her age is concerned. She's like 40 years old. She has twins. It's a very difficult pregnancy. And problem, I think, honestly, with her is that she had trouble trusting. I mean, even if you watch the Barbara Walters interview and, you know, she's like, oh, he's a man. And he's over there like, what are you talking about? You know, and just watching their body language, I think in some ways she kind of almost willed it to happen. I mean, not to say that he cheated because, you know, who knows, but willed the end of the relationship. She just couldn't really quite trust. And they had this divorce, which she talks about in the book as being, it should have been an easy divorce. They get along very well now. It did not end up being an easy divorce. It ended up being several years. And she talks about it being you know, a very emotional divorce. It ended up taking a couple of years and emotions got very high. Apparently, they're very good friends now. They celebrate a lot of holidays together. They co parent their children together very well. But here's the thing, you talk about the messiest part of the divorce. What came out after the divorce, and the twins are now like 11 or something like that, that she has bipolar 2. And she actually talks about how this is something she has struggled with for a number of years, and she has struggled with it privately. And another very famous couple, by the way, has talked about this and the struggles, and that is Kim and Kanye. And I talk about this in my video, Narcissistic Red Flags, Kim and Kanye's Marriage, which you can check out that video if you want. Hey, it is tough enough to deal with marriage. It's tough enough to deal with marriage when you have to add in the mix of mental health issues, and then you add in the scrutiny of a lot of press, children. It makes it very, very hard. And I think that really adds to the stress and strain of marriage and divorce and puts a lot of pressure on these people, then really does make it very, very messy. So I think she was having a hard time regulating her medication. She's been, to give her a lot of credit, she has been pretty open about the entire situation at this point. She has come out and said that she has been battling it. She apparently was first diagnosed in 2001 when she was hospitalized for her physical and mental breakdown. She said she didn't want to believe it. She finally sought treatment. She has lived in constant fear of that somebody would expose her. And she finally just decided that she was just going to come out and talk about it. So I think honestly, that has been a huge part of what caused the messy part of their divorce as well. It took 2 years to finalize. They had a 6-year marriage. They were married in 2008. The twins were born in 2011. He filed for divorce in 2014. The divorce was finalized in 2016. So, I think the most important thing when you are dealing with divorce and when you're dealing with anything difficult is to remember that you are whole and complete and to learn from your mistakes, to stand in your power, to become a better version of yourself and to forgive yourself, even if you've been through these messy things, because we all have messes in our lives. We've all done things that maybe we're not proud of, and we've all had stuff that we've had to deal with. That's just part of living, that's part of being human. And, we're all learning from all of this stuff. So, hey, it's okay, right? We move forward, we become whole, we become complete, we stand in our power, and we become bigger, better versions of ourselves as a result.
So let's talk about Brad and Angelina. I've actually talked about Brad and Angelina before on Extra. I've made commentary about what was going on with them, and it's still going on. This divorce is actually almost lasting longer than their marriage, which sometimes happens, as some of you out there probably know. I've seen divorces last longer than marriages, more than a few times. So it definitely does happen. And it seemed to sort of start with this whole story of Brad on an airplane with the kids, and he was inebriated in some way and he lost his temper with one of the children, and she had had enough. I guess it was on a private jet, of course, and that was it. She was like ready to be done, and so she files for divorce. But it gets really, really hairy then after that, because now she's withholding the children from him. She's saying that he has a problem with alcohol and drugs. I believe that there was some sort of investigation done. Somebody actually anonymously called, and there was an investigation done based on the attack on the jet with the alcohol and all that sort of thing. So apparently, what happened was shortly after the plane took off, Brad and Angelina began arguing, and their oldest son, Maddox, was trying to defend Angelina. He's trying to defend his mom. And Brad was not happy. He didn't enjoy that. So he like lunged at the kid, tried to attack him. And this whole I'm sure it was just a fantastic scene there on the airplane. Okay. So, but of course, some people are saying they weren't actually arguing. He wasn't actually drunk. Who the heck knows? All I know is that at some point, Angelina decided that she wanted sole custody, and that she was saying that he had a problem with alcohol. So, more than likely, that's the real reason that she really wanted to divorce him, is because of his alcohol abuse. And I have talked before about the three deadly sins of marriage, which I call abuse, addiction, and adultery, which are the three A's. I call them the three deadly sins. And he has come out since then, by the way, and said, "Hey, I had a problem. I had an issue." And he actually said in GQ in 2017 that this whole split has been a huge generator for change in his life, that he can't remember a day since he got out of college that he wasn't boozing or had something. And, he was running away from feelings. That's what he says. So I'm sure that she had good reason at that time to think that he had a problem and wanted to protect the children. Now, when you are a parent who is protecting children, but you've also gone through a situation with the other parent where you feel like they haven't been respectful of you, or that they haven't been respectful of the children, or bad things have gone down between you, there is also a tendency sometimes for that parent to not just want to protect the children, but kind of hide behind, "I'm going to protect the children," and they're really trying to punish the other parent because they're angry at the other parent. They're angry at them for not being everything they wanted them to be, the relationship having to go down, the way that they might have behaved, things that they might have said, things they didn't do, that sort of thing. So they get very angry at these people, and they end up sort of trying to punish the other person by saying, "I'm going to turn the kids against you. I'm not going to let you see the children." So it's more than just gatekeeping. It's more than just protecting. It now gets to the point of what is sometimes referred to as parental alienation. Some people don't like that word nowadays, but that is the word that the courts use. And I definitely have videos on narcissistic parental alienation if you want to check those out as well. But I heard the judge at one point, and I talked about this on Extra, say to Angelina, like, "You give him time sharing, or I'm going to take away your time sharing." And that's a judge who is understanding parental alienation. That's a judge who's saying, both parents have rights. And if you don't, notice that the other person is, and acknowledge that the other person is a parent who has rights as well, then your rights are going to get impinged upon. So that's something that I did notice that the judge did at one point. But there's been custody evaluations. There's still things going on. This thing has gone on forever. And that tells me that there may be something more than just this custody thing going on. Okay. Because normally cases don't last forever unless there's at least one narcissist involved. And if you agree with me, I want to see an amen in the comments, right? There's usually at least one narcissist involved if it goes on and on and on and on and on, because they get narcissistic supply from dragging you through the court system. So the fact that this is continuing on and on is telling me that one of them is definitely a narcissist, especially because most of the time um, with celebrities, you see them settle quickly. You see them settle behind closed doors. I mean, because they don't want it to be dragged out. They don't want the press to be all involved. So they do what they need to do to get it settled quickly. So the fact that this is going on and on is telling me that there's probably a narcissist involved, or there's mental illness or something like that. So um, when you are dealing with that in a divorce, you definitely want to grab the edge with them right away. You don't want to let them get away with anything. If they're like even one day late with their discovery, you want to make sure you file that motion to compel right away. Don't bother trying to settle it with letters back and forth right at the beginning when you have no leverage, because when you send over a settlement proposal like that, you're basically saying, here you go. Here's a way to jerk me around, because they're never going to settle that way. Never. And I'm not saying you can't settle in mediation or you can't settle at a negotiation, because you absolutely can. But when you try to settle at the beginning of the case like that with no leverage, you definitely aren't going to be able to, especially if you have somebody who's a narcissist involved. I have to say, the term high conflict personality is one of those things that you hear a lot. If you're going through divorce, you always almost feel like your spouse is a high conflict personality. But whether they actually are a narcissist or a high conflict personality, maybe just a perception because they're dealing with a divorce, right? So, what are your thoughts as to what actually is a high conflict personality versus just a regular divorcing personality?
Okay, well, this is a very important topic, so I'm glad you asked that. Really think in terms of a continuum that people have more or less difficulty. And in terms of high conflict personality, what it really boils down to, from what I've seen, and I speak around the world and it's the same everywhere, is basically four characteristics. One is a preoccupation with blaming other people and not taking responsibility themselves. Second, really, is a lot of all or nothing thinking. This person's all bad, I'm all good. The solution is you go away and I have the kids 100% of the time, or I have the house and the money, I get 100% of everything. It's that kind of all or nothing thinking. Then thirdly is unmanaged emotions. And for some people, this is yelling, screaming, throwing things, punching a hole in the wall, storming out of court during their own hearing. I teach judges and I say, how many have had someone storm out of the courtroom during their own hearing? And half the judges usually raise their hand. And one time, one of the judges said the other half are new. We haven't had this happen yet. So there's unmanaged emotions, but some people don't show that as dramatically. They may be very controlled, but their emotions take them off course. And they're busy reacting rather than planning what to do. And the fourth is extreme behavior, that they do things that sometimes 90% of people would never do, in terms of causing a scene somewhere, in terms of spreading really vicious rumors on the internet, a variety of things. Of course, domestic violence, hiding money, hiding children, all of that. So at the extreme is really, we see that pattern at the extreme in the worst cases. But people often feel like that's happening and see it first in the other party before they see it in themselves. So this is high conflict personalities. Now let me talk briefly about personality disorders. Narcissist is a personality disorder. Again, it's on a continuum. How extreme does it get? And the key point is, when does the person stop looking at themselves? And so if you have someone who seems kind of self-centered or preoccupied with themselves, doesn't mean they have a personality disorder. Personality disorder comes when they don't look at themselves. They can only see other people's responsibility and problems, and they don't change anything. And so when there's a high conflict dispute, there may be one or two people who aren't changing at all, and that just keeps it going. And from what I've seen, high conflict cases, about half of them are one reasonable person and one high conflict personality. But the other half tend to be two high conflict personalities who just can't look at their own part in the problem.
Yeah, so those are the ones that end up in trial.
Yes.
Over and over again.
Yes.
I used to say, when I wrote my first book about all of this, that half of trials were really more about personality issues than legal issues.
Oh, absolutely.
And I started saying that to judges, because I was asked to speak to judges. And they said, Bill, you've got it wrong. And I'm thinking, oh, I overestimated. They said, no, Bill, it's 70% personality-based problems. So the key, and your listeners should know this, if you can ask yourself these two questions on a regular basis, you don't have a high conflict personality, and you don't have a personality disorder. The two questions are, what's my part in this problem, whatever it is today, and what could I do differently in the future? Even if it's not really my fault, it's mostly the other person, always be looking at what can I do different? How can I have a different strategy? And I always ask myself that, even when things go badly that I really think have nothing to do with me, I still need to look at what could I try next time so that I'm better able to manage the situation.
So if you hear those two questions, like the Charlie Brown want, that means that you're in trouble.
Yeah, right, right. And
Well, I think that's so important though, because everyone, especially when we hear from listeners, they're very focused on the behaviors of their ex,
right,
but you
right.
rarely hear anything about their own participation in what's going on. And I don't know that there's any awareness around that there might be some role on the part of both sides in that ongoing conflict.
Yeah, and even if it really is mostly what's happening by the other person, we still need to look at what could we try doing differently. That's the key.
The
And
key is being able to take responsibility for your own behavior in some way.
exactly.
And these high conflict personality people are just not willing to do that.
No.
No, and what's great to me is I'll give a seminar or something and someone will come up afterward and say, you know, I'm kind of worried I might have a personality disorder. You describe characteristics that I have. Sometimes I have mood swings and sometimes I'm self-centered. And they say, so you're looking at yourself and you're concerned. Yeah. And you're thinking of changing some of what you do. Yeah. Then you don't have a personality disorder.
Oh, I had to laugh when you said you couldn't, and people who can't control their behavior. I had a client one time, my client, his wife was testifying on the stand, and he's sitting next to me at counsel table, and he yells out, "That's a lie!" right in the middle of the hearing. And I'm looking at him like, could you shut your mouth?
Yes, yes. That's the unmanaged emotions part.
Yes, exactly.
And it unfortunately demonstrates the opposite of what they're trying to say. You know, so I'm a more responsible person, then why can't you kind of hold your tongue?
Exactly.